Ed Willis. It's been a while since we've done a video. We kind of put them on hiatus for a while, and last time we were talking about the end of the world when it came to the pandemic. Well, look what's dropped in our lap now. Another layer of crap for 2020.
It's amazing. Like these are like generational stories, right? They're gonna,
Absolutely.
they're gonna be felt and for like decades to come, and just on the heels of each other. And that just kind of getting used to the pandemic and the way it's disrupted our lives, and then what's happening in the states now, and really it's global. It's globally now. It's just so jarring because it just can't seem to. It didn't come up from out of nowhere. That's the whole point. But I don't think anybody was prepared for what's happened.
No, absolutely. And the way it keeps continuing, right? And the different layers to the story and the way it's being stoked and all those things. I know we've touched on this before when they had the riots in Ferguson a few years ago, and going back to Rodney King, we would look at how, in particular, people in this community maybe have similar stories or different experiences. And I know that you've spoken to a couple of BC Lions and ex-BC Lions about their experiences. They really do have a different perspective on this than, say, you or I could come up with.
No, yeah, 100%. And I mean, the two guys I wrote about today, Brian Burnham and G. Roy Simon, and I've got to call into Micah Johnson, who apparently has strong feelings on this as well. I just haven't been able to reach him. But I mean, the stories they tell, they're so intensely personal. It's like it's painful to listen to try and put yourself in their shoes, and think that's the way they lived, and two completely different backgrounds from different parts of the states. Uh, Brian Burnham was raised in this leafy enclave just outside of Philadelphia. I mean, his dad was a celebrated NFL player. He became a psychologist. So I mean, he said before he went to Tulsa, he was really insulated from racial tension, and then when he got to Tulsa, he was exposed to it in a big way. And again, he talked so openly about it, and you could tell it really impacted him in a profound way. And then Roy's from Western Pennsylvania, and you don't think of Western Pennsylvania as particularly racially charged, but he tells stories of what that was like. And then he tells stories about he went to school at Maryland, which is just outside of Washington, D.C., and talked about some of the things he experienced there. So I mean, I asked them both the same question. I said, if I went to every black member of the BC Lions, would they have a similar story to tell about a negative experience with the police? And they said, G. Roy said 90%, and 90% of them would, and Brian said, yeah, pretty well all of them would.
Yeah, and that was stunning to me. Maybe, I mean, that's obviously it's not scientific, but when you think of the players that you've talked to over the years, I'm sure it's accurate. And there was your piece with Burnham as well. Like, these are big, strong guys who are used to in their football life being
Yep.
alpha males, and that when they talk of that fear when they see the lights flashing behind them, because that's the other level. I mean, there's just the systematic racism that happens in the U.S., but then there's those encounters with the police, and it is interesting to see them talk about it. Nonetheless, it's very sad.
Yeah, it is, and that was kind of in Burnham's case particularly. That was the overriding emotion. That here we are in 2020, and we're still talking about this. And God, Paul, it impacts me. As I'm 64, I've lived in Canada my whole life. There was one black kid in the high school I went to in Ottawa, and that was it. But to see this issue through the prism of these men who've experienced it firsthand, and I just kind of feel like, somewhere along the line, we've all let them down. Should have been better, especially my generation, coming out of, the 60s, and everything was idealistic. And I don't know what happened. We just we got distracted, or we took our eye off the ball, or something happened.
Too comfortable, maybe.
And that could vary, yeah. Maybe it's that simple, but it's never that simple. And here we are. Yet again, but I was thinking about this. I think I wrote about it on Sunday. Like, I have those TV images. I've been living with them since I was like 10 years old. In Selma, Montgomery, and on and on and on, and here we are, and we just seem to be stuck in the same place.
Yeah, absolutely. And now with everything being recorded, I mean, the amount of seminal moments, which maybe dilutes it in a way that we see through social media, just. I mean, where do you point? The Rodney King was the one moment you remember.
That's right.
Then there were the riots. They pulled the guy out of the truck. Those were the moments you remember. There's like 700 of those moments in the last 24 hours.
Well, and I think that's the big difference now. Is just I think the sheer volume of these incidents are carrying it. And so I was talking to somebody else, and they said, before it was kind of like he said, she said, or there was resisting arrest, all those code words that were involved in it. Well, now there's visual evidence, and all you have to do is spend 15 minutes on Twitter, and you're just overwhelmed with these images of police abuse and police brutality and the rest of it. And that's why it doesn't feel like this is going away anytime soon. I'm just really curious to see where it's going to take us.
Absolutely. So it's a great column. People have to read it. Now, you've been doing these wonderful catch-ups with some figures in Vancouver sport. If you didn't see the one last week, Ed wrote about Rick Blight, the former Canuck who tragically took his own life. A great story where Ed talked to his widow. This week, you've got a different one coming up, getting away from the ice a little bit.
Yeah, it's Michael Olajide, and I had a vague memory of him as a boxer in the 80s who kind of separated himself from a lot of the Canadian fighters of that era. And I had sort of a vague memory of him kind of getting so far, and that was it. Well, he's got this. I mean, look, the best writer on his best day couldn't come up with the life this guy has led, because he's become a celebrity fitness instructor, but that only tells part of the story because he's worked with Dustin Hoffman, he's worked with Hugh Jackman, he's worked with Liev Schreiber. His latest project is an app with Chris Hemsworth that he's involved with. He's trained. One of his regular gigs was training supermodels, getting them ready for the walkway.
That was my fallback if journalism.
Well, that was I looked into that myself, and I just couldn't find that opportunity. And he trained Linda Evangelista, and I'm sort of blanking out on the other supermodel he trained with. And he's just like, I talked to him for 90 minutes. He's just like a wonderful, warm guy, and he's talking about this, and he's he was describing his meeting with Dustin Hoffman, and Dustin Hoffman insisted they have it in his kitchen, and they're talking, and he goes, "You look hungry. Can I make you a sandwich?" And Elijah Day is watching him, and he's going, "Yeah, it's like the marathon man is making me a sandwich." It was just so surreal. So there's a whole many levels to the story, and it's not all fun and games. There's a real dark, tragic side to it as well. But I mean, dude's a survivor, and he's still he's living. Interestingly enough, he's living in New York. In uptown New York, and it's kind of a lot of that stuff we've been talking about is not going right outside his window. I think it's more concentrated in Midtown, but all he has to do is get on a subway and go 3 stops, and he's right in the middle of it.
It's great stuff, Ed. I can't wait to read it. Your Burnham and G-Roy piece on the troubles down south as well. Very good to read. So we'll do another one of these towards the weekend, but thanks for listening, everyone. Thanks, Ed.